Welcome, friends. Please silence your cell phones. Today's talk is on goals and aspirations. Next Sunday's presentation will be on the power of altruism. Yesterday, we had a special gathering to celebrate the Theosophical New Year, which began January 4th. Every Sunday at 11 a.m., we meet here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland, 20814. Every first and third Sunday of the month, following this hour, we read and discuss selected writings. Today being the first Sunday, we will continue to read and discuss The Key to Theosophy by H.P. Blavatsky. All work of this lodge is aimed at passing on, in their purity, teachings of the ancient message from the Masters of Wisdom that HPB named Theosophy. It is left to each of us to assimilate this powerful and common sense message, thus making it a living power in our lives. By so doing, we help nature and work on with her. The voice of the silence tells us that nature will then regard us as one of her own and make obeisance. Please help with your attendance on Sundays at 11 a.m. or whatever you can do in time, money, and otherwise to keep alive and thriving these uplifting teachings that are necessary for the future of humanity. We are guided by the declaration on the back of our program that Robin Crosby used in 1909 to launch UOT, thereby returning the teachings to the lines laid down. We work independently and with each other to achieve a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. We have neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between its associates is the furtherance of unity. We regard as theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and we welcome to our association all those who are in accord with the purposes in our declaration and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Bhavad-Gita, and following that will be the talk for the day.
Learn from me, in brief, in what manner the man who has reached perfection attains to the Supreme Spirit, which is the end, the aim, and highest condition of spiritual knowledge. Imbued with pure discrimination, restraining himself with resolution, having rejected the charms of sound and other objects of the senses, and casting off attachment and dislike, dwelling in secluded places, eating little, with speech, body, and mind controlled, engaging in constant meditation and unwaveringly fixed in dispassion, abandoning egotism, arrogance, violence, vanity, desire, anger, pride, and possession, with calmness ever present, a man is fitted to be the Supreme Being. And having thus attained to the Supreme, he is serene, sorrowing no more, and no more desiring, but alike towards all creatures he attains to supreme devotion to me. By this devotion to me, he knoweth fundamentally who and what I am, and having thus discovered me, he enters into me without any intermediate condition. And even the man who is always engaged in action shall attain by my favor to the eternal and incorruptible, imperishable abode, if he puts his trust in me alone. With thy heart, place all thy works on me, prefer me to all else, exercise mental devotion continually, and think constantly of me. By so doing thou shalt by my divine favor surmount every difficulty which surroundeth thee. But if from pride thou wilt not listen to my words, thou shalt undoubtedly be lost. And if, indulging self-confidence, thou sayest, I will not fight, such a determination will prove itself vain. For the principles of thy nature will impel thee to engage. Being bound by all past karma to thy natural duties, thou, O son of Kunti, wilt involuntarily do from necessity that which in thy folly thou wouldst not do. There dwelleth in the heart of every creature, O Arjuna, the Master, Ishvara, who by his magic power causeth all things and creatures to revolve, mounted upon the universal wheel of time. Take sanctuary with him alone, O son of Bharata. With all thy soul, by his grace, thou shalt obtain supreme happiness, the eternal place. Thus have I made known unto thee this knowledge, which is a mystery more secret than secrecy itself. Ponder it fully in thy mind. Act as seemeth best unto thee. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Welcome, friends, to today's talk. This is the time of the year when a lot of us list our goals and how to achieve that desire. Most of the humanity at this stage of our development is still concerned about personal desires. Let us see what the difference is between goals and aspirations. So, as said, every human being has goals, but not many of us have aspirations. A goal always involves getting somewhere or something. So maybe we should put that up here. Getting and going something or somewhere. So the aspirant tries to achieve that. But aspirations are towards becoming. Becoming. An aspirant tries to embody principles in his daily life. It isn't for any reward, but just because he is composed of those principles and has a sense inwardly that this is the way it is. It's the truth. So an aspiration is the longing to make manifest something that we feel on the inside and to demonstrate the laws of the spirit in the world of matter. So one is getting or going someplace. It's a personal desire-based achievement. The other one involves principles, becoming. Principles. Reaching a goal is always contingent on conditions in time and space, but no conditions can measure or hinder the fulfillment of aspiration. So the goals, time and space, not so the other. Aspirations are based on principles and its fulfillment is not conditioned by time or space. Goals are the mileposts of personal achievement. Aspirations, the eternal yearning of the spirit itself. This is personal achievement. This is the spirit exhibiting itself through substance. So the states of matter known to man are all conditioned and limited. So when the hunger for unity becomes reflected in the personal man, it always partakes of the limitations of matter. So as you are all aware, all of the principles of the philosophical tenets are based on unity, brotherhood. So when that actually becomes a goal of the human being, it is still subject to limitations of matter. So the personal goals always defined in terms of conditions or objectives. Objectives. Can't write today. Objectives. So, if we put this to everyday verbology, what is it that everybody wants from life? Well, perhaps happiness? This would be a general goal of many people. People want to be happy. They want happiness. But even though we know what that means, no two people would probably agree to its signification. For theosophical students and theosophists everywhere, happiness is a state of feeling. Devakan for the person, nirvana for the ego. So at root, the desire for happiness springs from unconscious memory of nirvanic bliss. So we have Devakan and Nirvana. Since this is not personal but impersonal, the incoming ego has been on the scene and remembers that nirvanic bliss. In personal life then, this memory emerges as a demand for a frictionless life, some lifestyle that has very little friction, or in another way, we're asking for progress without suffering any pain. So it is kind of irrational, because all developmental stages in one's life requires effort, and that effort is normally dependent on changing something in our life in order to achieve it. So it involves pain and suffering. So this is frictionless life. And it's irrational. It cannot be rational because it cannot be achieved without any effort or pain. And we're all aware that peace is a condition of happiness. But in human life, we're always putting our desires also in the front of whatever it is that we want to achieve. So what this amounts to saying is that we're striking to compromise with nature to contract to a certain degree of peace by sacrificing something in exchange for it. So that this establishment of that relation is what most human beings do all through their lives. They want to have some of their desires, and they want to have as little friction and as little suffering in it as possible. So we're trying to harmonize our lives and make a contract with nature. Theosophists are engaged in trying to find out about human nature in themselves as well as in others, And they're kind of aware as to the difference between a goal and an aspiration. But the personality is a inveterate bargainer. But the higher ego, as we just read in the Gita, never says, I'll give up this if you let me have that. That's the personality. Where the higher ego is concerned, compromise is not possible. So there's no compromise on this side. The higher self always says, you have been given the facts, the truth, now make a decision. It leaves that free choice to the personality aspect of the human being, because it cannot make that choice for us. So then, the personality always looks back on the weaknesses of the past with complacent calm, and makes the remark that, after all, we're human, which is true, we are human. But what a man thinks is a spiritual ideals that has a string attached to it, which are personal conditions, is the personality's way of bribery in achieving that end result. This goal may be based on ideals, but it is not a spiritual, because as we said, compromise with the things of the spirit is not possible. Compromise is simply a hallmark of human nature. So, human nature. The spirit, not so. So, if you look around in our societal norm today, we have a whole slew of self-help books. You go to the book, it gives you not principles, but somehow some psychological facts based on observation as to how you can achieve this side of it, the goal that is based on personal desire. So you go to the book, it's there for you to look at it, and you're going to say, well, what is it I want to do, or what is it I want to have? And there's a prescriptive ideals in there for you to follow based on facts from the human perspective as to how you're going to get it. So these books also give you some discipline at the outset. For instance, one of the things that it is stated in those books from personal experience is that you cannot have everything in your life. In order to achieve a certain goal, you have to give something up. And if it is really something you want, then you're willing to give that up. For instance, if you want to become wealthy, well, you cannot be lazy and sit at home and expect someone else to do the work on your behalf. So if that's the objective, then you have to work for it. So work is necessary. And no one else is going to do this work for us. We have to do it. So the self-denial for certain things become easier as our goal is objectivized and we have a program how to go about getting it. So that can be considered the yoga of the personality. So we'll put it here. Yoga of personality. So it is designed, those books are designed to make the determinations of the personal will more effective. Now, we all have this in our lives. We have personal desires, very few of us have aspirations. But it says here that aspirations flare up in the personal mind during those intervals when the personal goal and the aspiration seem to be the same thing. Personal goal and the aspiration seem to be the same thing. But inevitably, it says, when the wheel of life turns, the aspiration is seen to interfere with the attainment of some personal objective. So then it becomes very convenient to forget the aspiration. We rarely do this on purpose, but rather we let the aspiration fade away. We let it fade away. We don't pursue it because it interferes with the personal desire over here. Aspiration, pure and simple, does not offer any comfort or any bribe, but it is a desire of the personal self that interferes with it, because the human will has to be aroused both for the personal and for the impersonal. So, the aspiration is obviously noble because it's impersonal. It's a noble cause. And at first, we start with tremendous enthusiasm for it. But somewhere along the line, the enthusiasm wanes away or wanes off. So, in the Theosophy writings, always we're cautioned that this is personal deception of the personality. If something that we have undertaken and have worked for a long time suddenly loses its importance, or we lose enthusiasm for it, then that's the time we have to go back to the beginning to inquire as to what was it that we started as a goal or as an aspiration. The personal never has any sorrow or dissatisfaction for the other side. But if it is personal for itself, that's when that sorrow comes into it. If it's not personal, one cannot feel sorrow about it. So we need to make that distinction when we go to inquire as to what went wrong with our noble, enthusiastic idea as to what we were going to do about how to get it. So at this stage, it's like our life has no pleasure in it. Everything has dropped off. We're in a kind of limbo. We don't know in which direction we're supposed to go. And it is stated that this comes to all of us. Somewhere along the line, we're going to feel that dichotomy in our lives, and we're going to wonder what exactly is going on. What is it that I need to do? Where did I go wrong? And scrutinize our aspiration to see what it is that has gone wrong, or how we went wrong in looking at it. And it is stated that life at that point becomes very discouraging. Just like Arjuna 5,000 years ago experienced it, that's what it is described there too. So when we reach this point, when we are questioning as to what went wrong with our aspiration, tanha, which is thirst for life, is dying off. It's a natural way of doing things, and it's going to definitely go away on its own. So what is it that we're to do? Are we supposed to fall back on the personal, or are we going to go with the impersonal? That's the question here. If we go with the personal, and we know it is not correct, but we are doing it anyway, we have made a decision to go this way, we can, it says here, throw ourselves back into the whirl of the world for this personal life. In this life that this occurs to one, it is moral death. In that incarnation, it's moral death. One who follows it is shriveled rather than refined by the fire of that discipleship that moves one towards this aspiration side of the equation, which is impersonal, which is noble, which is consideration of the other first, this side. So in that case, the person treasures the goal and is willing to sacrifice the aspiration, but it will shrivel you, it will diminish it. It will diminish it. So, in the theosophical parlance, why are we asked to study philosophy? Because our decisions need to be based on knowledge as to who we are. Which is it that I am going to consider, for instance? Am I the individuality that is showing me this internal yearning towards the truth, towards knowledge? Or am I going to identify myself with my personality, which is also the lower ego, the lower mind, which is here for that one lifetime, but at the end of that lifetime it's going to depart, and all the gain that we have achieved is going to go with it, because it will not become permanent aspect of that individuality. Only the spiritual, impersonal, altruistic aspect of each human soul becomes part of it, and it's assimilated into it. There's an article that you might want to read called The Mysteries of Afterlife. In that article it is referred to as the Sutratman, and each personal life is like a bead on that spiritual line, but the bead only represents the spiritual aspect of that personal life on that during that incarnation. So knowledge then is important in making these decisions. The circumstances of our existence gradually kind of move us away from the illusion of the personal and into the reality of the impersonal. All the events that come is to teach us this comparison in our lives. So the knowledge then turns its light on every event, and the mere presence of that event that the karma brings us is making us make a choice. We can go one way or we can go the other way. The human soul is free, has free will. It has to make its own choice. It is not interfered with. But once the plane of existence, once that particular plane of existence has provided all of the experience that we have needed for our growth, it's just what it is. It's a field of learning that we have done. And we need to move above the circumstances of our life. But the soul cannot be pushed upward through karma. Soul cannot be pushed upward by karma. It must achieve that by personal effort. It cannot be pushed up. It has to achieve it by personal effort. In order to go one higher on that ladder of evolution, it has to use its own divine energy. And that divine energy is what? In the voice of the silence, it is defined as Virya. So its inherent dirigibility is the moving power of each human soul. So that is Virya. We gave examples of this in the Theosophical talks in the previous seasons, where it was presented as a parabola, where Dana, Shila, Shanti is on the left side, and then Virya, Shanti, Virya, and Dharana or Dhyana, and Prana or Prajna is the right side of that parabola. Virya being the midpoint because it affects both sides of the parabola. That is why in the altruistic works that we undertake, we are to exercise dana, which is love and charity for all, shila, which is harmony, shanti is patience. But once those things come into effect in our lives, it affects the right side also, because it automatically activates the others, the higher aspect of itself. But virya, that divine energy, is necessary for all of it. So how does the spiritual will act? It says in the writings that if we can find someone who has absolutely no ambition, but who works with the same ardor and care as the one who has the most determined goal in life, then that is a spiritual will at work. Or someone who works really hard to help his community without expecting anything in return, that is also a spiritual will in action. Or someone who is very beneficent with their speech because they use it so very cautiously, only making statements at the right time to the right people under a spiritual guidance. So then the spiritual will must provide the impetus for action where the personality has no interest. If we have moved to the other side, this side is then become an opposition party to that effort that we are exerting. So once the personality realizes that every progressive step on that path is exclusion of itself, eventually will boycott all the strivings of the soul. If the spiritual will fails to sustain the life of the man, maintaining balance and normal activity throughout this period of psychic revolution, he will fail. All his so-called progress will be lost. So the disciplines he instituted for personal reasons will fall away. All distractions and temptations will return a strengthened many multiples of the original effort that was going into it. So the bare structure of established habit, whether it is physiologic and psychic, remains his only defense. The personal has died and the spiritual will is yet unborn. The strange weaknesses come upon a man who has accomplished much from the force of personal desire. But if that desire dies, what would happen to the accomplishment? So it is stated that one is protected against this crisis by daily practice of examining actions undertaken in terms of their motive. So if a man has gradually reconstructed his patterns of motivation according to the impersonal aspirations of the spirit, then when the personality dies away, he will not be left defenseless against the centrifugal forces of nature. I'm just going to remove this. Not good writing today, sorry. That's a U. Centrifugal. And in some other talks we mentioned these two forces, centrifugal and centripetal. We said that when we're coming down into existence in substance, the force is centrifugal. But on our return journey home to the central spiritual sun, from which we come and eventually to whom which we return, it's centripetal energy. So in this struggle, then here we see these two forces we have to face. If we fall back to the personal, centrifugal, we have to face it. So we have to become like the serpent, we have kind of established a second skin under the first skin, but the first skin is kind of falling off and the other one hasn't come to the surface yet. But that's the position in this comparison here. Or we can compare ourselves to the evergreen of the north, which is the simple symbol of continual rebirth, where no nakedness of winter is ever present. I wanted to read to you from a magazine. I found this in the Theosophical movement. It says here, Virya means spiritual courage. Shanti and Virya go hand in hand. And when Virya rests on Shanti, which is patience, it is sattvic in nature. The patient that cultivates Virya is the higher patience. So when the left side is active, it cultivates the other side as well. And again it says, Virya is divine will. Will is the colorless force, the force of a spirit in action. So divine will or spiritual will comes into play when we stop asserting our personal will. When we begin denying ourselves whims and fancies, then we are activating the other one. At the higher stage, Virya is needed to fight all of the forces which has been accumulated as evil by whole humanity. So this is what each one has to face in this combat here. I will read this and open it for questions. In the theosophical terms, the 21st century is not actually based on happiness of the personality, and I want to read this to you from these writings. And its heading is happiness. No man, whether lover or merchant or warrior, can in reality be personally happy while mankind suffers. And our society is truly in turmoil. There's a lot of suffering going on. Should he be, it is evidence that the personal self is numb to the bond that ties all humanity and is not safe from total breakage of that bond with the consequent plunge into limbo. The oft heard argument, why be unhappy about things we cannot remedy, is all too often an excuse for inaction in things that we could remedy. This is not an age for happiness, but for duty. Happiness is not sought by the highest beings, nor their disciples. In this age, the state nearest to happiness is attained by those wholly devoted to right action. It is the peace entered into by those whose vision has widened to embrace all ages. In our present darkness, the sole remaining light is devotion to immortal duty. Now we'll open it to questions. Yes?
Could you go over again why you related centrifugal to aspirations? It looks like on the board you did that.
That was the only spot available to write it.
So, because it sounded like you were relating that to goals when you were.
Yeah, if the person goes backwards to the personal and ignores the aspiration is the yearning of the soul, making its nudging to the personality. It wants to show you why you're here from the soul perspective. But if your desires on this side overpower it and you are not attuning your ear to that inspiration that comes from inside, the soul is trying to make itself known because it has come for a particular task in that lifetime. but you have to listen to it and follow it. This is not an intellectual activity. It is an internal activity. You have to listen to what the soul is saying to you, because it has a voice. It can only be heard in silence. And we have to learn to be quiet and to listen. The hum in the heart cannot make itself known because it is attuned to the central spiritual sun. You have to attune yourself to it. But that yearning that comes from the inside, if you don't listen to it, then you're falling back onto the personal, and that force is centrifugal. You have to face it, because it is centrifugal, because you're encased in matter. The soul, the spiritual entity, is trying to show you the way out of substance, because it has provided you all that experience on that plane of existence, and now it is saying you have learned it. You need to move upward in that scale of evolution. It is trying to show you how to scale it up, but it cannot force you, neither can it do it for you. You have to accept that responsibility and put your effort into it. Indomitable willpower is required of us in this age. Indomitable willpower, because how many lifetimes have we spent in incarnation descending into matter? We've been in evolution 1 million years to coming down. So we have encased ourselves and made it a binding force. Now what we have to do is crush it. It really requires crushing it, and you're going to move in its opposite direction. It's not personal, it's impersonal. This is impersonal. So maybe we should take centrifugal out of here, not to cause problems. Put it here. This is impersonal. And HPV in her lifetime said, be impersonal, learn to rely on principle. Once let people make this a personal thing to themselves, you know it isn't correct. This is an impersonal philosophy. It is for all of humanity, every human soul having the same significance as every other. But we are not developmentally at the same place. All of us have lived, and we live by choice, so the coming effect is our own. We have to face what we have created, and we are all in different places, but every human soul has the same value as far as the central spiritual sun is concerned. We all come from that same center. We're going to return to it. All those who are willing to undertake this work. This part of our developmental stage requires effort, requires indomitable willpower, because this is not an easy scaling upward movement. It requires work. So we have to, yes?
Could you address again what the yoga of personality is?
Yeah, all those self-help books, the ones that depend on psychological observations and give you a kind of a prescription as to what you have to do to get what you want. But it's on this side of it. That's why it is called the yoga of the personality, because it's dependent on personal desire and wishes. It wants to make your personal life more effective. It has value, but for instance, it tells you that you have to sacrifice in order to get what you want, because you can't have everything you want. You have to sacrifice something in order to move in the direction you wish to go. There's nothing wrong with it if that's the concentration of that particular lifetime. But if you have moved here and you're now oscillating back and forth, you don't know in which direction you're going, which comes to all of us, a decision has to be made. if you fall backwards after going to this side of the equation, and you're falling backwards, then you're telling your soul, hey, I don't want to listen to anything you have to say. I'm going my own way. Personality is very deceitful in certain ways. It comes up with many, many good reasons as to why it should not do it. Because it's, anyway. But if you go backwards after coming here, what is that going to do to you is what you need to think about. It will shrivel you because you have decided to go against your soul nature. So your soul nature is in accordance with the nature. Once you become its assistant, then only can you know in which direction your path lies. It won't show it to you until you align yourself with it. But it comes to everybody, and this writing say that if you go backwards, that's moral death in this lifetime. You're going to shrivel. You will not expand. Because knowledge is what? Based on the inner man. The inner man, the higher mind, is the higher part of that entity, Atma Buddhi Manas. But it's the higher mind. Even though there is one mind, the intellectual part being this here. It aligns itself with the personal side of your nature, and at the cost of the spiritual side of its own nature dominates this part here. And a spiritual shriveling occurs when the human being has become an intellectual giant, is what that Genius article says. You can be an intellectual giant in science, in philosophy, in whatever field you're in. You can become an intellectual giant, but it is at a cost to the spiritual side of your nature. And at the end of that life, what would you retain from it is what we really need to ask. If the intellectual mind just goes with that life span, and you're going to get a new one in your next incarnation, what would you have gained? Materialistic. All of it would be materialistic. Yeah?
I'm a little confused. Aspiration, of course, is impersonal. Okay? And
Sorry?
Aspiration comes from within out.
Uh-huh.
So how do I, I want everybody to do well and this, that, and the other. Okay, that's my aspiration, or do spiritual as well as physically. But until I do something which comes over to the goal side, I mean, it seems like we need to have some kind of a balance there with the aspiration leading the charge.
So let us see if we can restate your question. Your question, you said at the beginning that you want everyone to do well. But what exactly is your question? How do you
we're in a
differentiate?
material world, and we don't think about spiritual side, which is the real world. So we want everybody to be able to see that. That's our aspiration, or we want to be able to see it ourselves, because I don't think we tend to see it too well either.
Well, let's just, I'm sorry.
How do we do that without having some kind of intellectual process going on the goal side?
Okay. We said that this philosophy says obtaining of knowledge is very important. Which part of you aligns with knowledge? Is that not your higher mind?
My higher mind combined with my
Atma, Buddhi, Manas. Okay. A spirit, a spiritual discrimination, or a spiritual soul, mind, a spirit. Okay. This is the permanent aspect of you, is it not? Mm-hmm. Okay. The mind works in two different ways. The intellectual goes towards the personal. We all have to go through these processes. The other one goes towards metaphysical. Truth, reality. This is personal. Personal is desire-based. Is it not? Because you want to achieve something for yourself. You have goals and you want to go towards that. And there's nothing wrong with it if that's what you want from that particular life. But we are now talking about goal and aspiration. There comes a time when this becomes dissatisfactory to the soul, because it has shown you all of the events of that plane of existence. You have gained all of the experience that you need. Now the inner yearning of the soul is trying to awaken you to move up the ladder of evolution. But it cannot push you, neither karma can make that choice for you or push you up. What needs to happen there is that the soul energy has to push you up. Where's the soul energy coming from? It doesn't come from the intellectual, because this is personal and desire-based, but it comes from the divine mind, because the will aspect of you is that divine energy. Without its activation, no aspiration is going to come to pass. You're going to push it away if it doesn't fit into your personal aspect of your life. But this is for those who have become awakened to that inner reality. The inner soul is trying to show itself to you, trying to guide you. If you don't take it, it cannot force it on you. You have free will. We just read in the Gita, I have shown you the truth. I have taught you everything you need to know. I have given you this knowledge, which is more important than secrecy itself. But Krishna to Arjuna did not make that command, now do as I tell you. It said, I have taught it to you. Now make your choice as to what you wish to do. It didn't force it. It cannot do it. The free will of man is there. So if you're moving in this direction towards aspiration, it says do love and charity, right? All of us are capable of that. In time, you become more capable of exerting your influence in that direction, because the opportunity is provided by karma. Okay? What else did we say? Patience, harmony, all those you have to exhibit to some degree in yourself as you are moving even in this path here, the personal path. But once that awakening has started, HPV says it will not leave you alone. You're either going to go and do it, or you're going to fail. One or the other. If you don't go along with it, it can't force you. So you have failed in this life, or however that works. The student is not making any judgments here. It's simply putting the philosophy out for people to think about it.
For those of us who fail, it also says that if you try, that in itself is a success.
Yeah.
If you fail, you can get up and try again.
Yes. And she tells us that's how you climb up the mountain. That you fall, you get up and do it again and again and again until you learn it. But if you have given up altogether and you go into the tumultuous side of life and trying to hide yourself in the activity of the personal self, then you have failed, because your nature will shrivel. You did not allow the soul to enlarge your scope to show you the higher life, which is impersonal. It is dependent on principle. It's spiritual in its nature, because it comes from this devakanic interlude or nirvanic interlude that the human soul brings with it into incarnation. There's no compromise in it. You either go with it or you don't. If you let it fade away, then you haven't gone along with it. If you have taken its suggestions and you're moving in that direction, it will show you the way. That's the way it works. But we also said that it is dependent on virya, which is that spiritual energy, which is the will. In the lower aspect, will and desire is not separate from one another. But on the higher aspect, it is, because it's the inherent energy of the soul, the higher mind, and it has to come to your aid in order to pull you up. And that is why they say align yourself with your higher mind. They have obviously an intention as to why they say it, but here it becomes more available to us to see that it has a purpose. The writings have a purpose. They express it in a certain way because it is based on truth and fact. It says here, the spirituality is not mere goodness, however necessary goodness may be, but knowledge and the will to do. Knowledge and the will. This will, not this, its lower aspect, this capitalized will, which is the higher aspect. Equally balanced and co-joined, not the mere intellectual ability to argue and discuss metaphysical ideas, but the translating of those ideas into bases of action on the material plane. It's strange that true soul progress should be thought of as evidenced by the doing of queer or extraordinary things. It's strange that so little worth is placed by men upon the rare and invaluable ability to act wisely in each and every event. Yet H.P. Blavatsky says that this simple ability is greater than the power to perform miracles, greater than seeing visions, matter. On the highest plane is seeing principles, which is a spirit on the lowest, and the adopting of those principles to the common tasks of daily routine. The theosophical life is one of sanctified common sense, the doing of whatever is done from the spiritual or impersonal point of view. The beginning of this life is the effort to find and apply universal laws to daily tasks. For yoga, or union with the spirit, is the skill in the performance of action. So, this is the higher mind activity of the human soul, showing itself as wisdom in everything that human being does, because it shows the human being what is to be done, how it is to be done, and it provides the opportunity to doing it. Karma brings it, you go out and do it, come home, you rest, you go out and do it some more.
Quick question, one more. Aspiration with respect to evolution or initiation, I think might be it, or taking a pledge. I mean, this is first you do it internally, but it continues on, right? From there, higher and higher.
Initiation is internal. You're not going somewhere to be initiated, if that's what you're asking.
That's the first question. Yeah.
Initiation is internal. It's the soul that is initiating you into that inner mystery, because it is awakening you to the inner possibilities of your soul life. Initiation is internal. It has many, many different stages that you're going to go through, because remember, all those paramita gates that HPV talks about are guarded. Every one of them is guarded. You cannot enter until you bring what is necessary inside of you to be allowed to pass through. These gates are real. There's a real entity at its head, and you have to go through it it will test you continuously to see if you're fit to do it. This a student used to go all over the place, and some person would approach and ask for some help, and I used to say, well, there must be something written on my forehead. I had no idea what was going on in my life at the time. I thought, well, there must be something written over here, because they all keep coming to me until I reversed that ideology. Rather than looking at it as an inconvenience, I thought, oh, it's nature's way of providing an opportunity to help somebody. I didn't look at it. See, that internal perceptive power has to come too. The experience comes, but if you haven't learned your lesson from it, it will repeat itself until the soul shows you what it is you need to get from that experience. In other words, the motivation, the correct thinking, the correct discrimination has to also become alive in you. This is not haphazard. It has a purpose in showing you that particular thing. So initiation is internal. You're not going somewhere to get initiated. It is your whole soul life that you have to get initiated into, with many, many, many obstacles on the way to overcome. It will test you over and over and over again. It's internal. I'm sorry, was there another part to your question?
That starts to, yeah. It
That's good
continues on,
enough?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Okay, we'll take a short break and then we'll start the Key to Theosophy Roundtable.
Thank you.